In 1969, the family house had burned, and I ended up living in 1970 in a rented two-story home north of Park Lane on Greenville, and that was very rural at the time. It was actually part of Vickery, Texas, sort of. And it was $75 a month. It was a huge downstairs, and then there was the stairs that go up, and it was just one room upstairs with a bath. So I don't know if that had been added or not, but the house had plainly been built probably at the turn of the century or the 1890s. There was something very lonely in that house, but that's true of all homes that have really been abandoned. It's sad, isn't it? You go in some of these homes and they've been abandoned. They're just no longer, loved. And you know that there were people born in those homes and they died in those homes, and there were Christmas trees and there were memories and weddings, and now it's empty. So I thought that really the melancholy I felt in that house was just based on that. And plus, I was going through a year of just trying to figure out what I was going to do when I didn't grow up. And I loved the upstairs bedroom because it was very much like the bedroom I grew up in. It's three sides of it were glass and windows. So I loved sleeping up there, except that I never slept well. There was something wrong, but I never really gave it much thought. Then I had what became my first experience, and my only experience actually, with what I think would be certifiably a ghost. I would see every now and then on the landing. I mean, I'm in the bedroom, and and the bed faces the hall that goes to the little hall that goes to the staircase. And I could see something kind of shimmering a little bit. And I really realized that that probably was a ghost because it felt like it. It felt something felt wrong. But I never felt scared. Honestly, I didn't. First of all, it's not my nature. And second of all, it just didn't feel threatening. But more and more and more, I began to see a little bit more clearly this image. I don't remember how often it happened. I lived in that house about a year and a half. And finally, it began to reveal itself more and more. And I'm not very good with the dates, but I would say that probably it was a girl in the range of between 9 and 11 years old. And it would have been probably the era of 1908 to 1916 or something in there, because she had, her hair was in sort of dark blonde, ash blonde curls with a big bow. There was kind of a bib here with all kinds of lace things. The sleeves went all the way down, but there would be a puff with all kinds of different detailing, like crewel work. And there were leggings. So she was all in beige. Everything was beige. And I couldn't see anything about her. I wouldn't tell anybody about it, and although this is going to sound funny, but the reason I wouldn't tell anybody is because at that point everyone was doing LSD and doing a lot of, and I just thought, you know what, these people are going to think I'm like, but I was very sober. But one night, she fully appeared. It went from being like a wave, it went more to being like a hologram. And I could see her. And at that point, and you would think I would be terrified, but I wasn't. My heart was broken and aching because I could see the look on her face, and the look on her face was absolute. She wanted so much to tell me something, but she couldn't. Her brow was done. She looked so frightened and angry and frustrated. There was just something, and my overriding feeling in my heart was that, what is this about? What, she's trying to tell me something. And then it started coming closer, and I don't know if being afraid is the way to describe it. I just was uncomfortable. And I lay there and I tensed up and I closed my eyes, and I could feel the coolness next to me, and you can also feel the light. you know how you can feel the light. And then I felt that recede and with the other. And at some point then, I opened my eyes again a little, and I could see that she was very close again. She was exiting the room and right at the beginning of the hall again. But she wasn't turning away from me as she did. She still had that look on her face like, you know, help me. And I never saw it again. But I will tell you something. It took me 3 years to realize what she was trying to tell me, and you won't leave here tonight not knowing. Something I learned in my travels that has served me well, oddly enough, which will be something we discover in the later in this act. When someone's been murdered, there's something left behind. I mean, when people die or they're killed, I can't speak for everything, and I'm not into all of the mysticism. I can just tell you the following two stories, which are not very long. And that is that 2 different times I was somewhere where I had the dream, and what the dream was exactly what had happened. The first was really, actually it's the second, was in Istanbul. I ended up in Istanbul in 73, and I kept having these blood and guts dreams every night about being hacked to death, and I'd wake up, and it was a disturbing dream, and it just went on and on and on and on and on, and then I found out that where this youth hostel was on the exact ground that had originally been the Hippodrome during the Byzantine Empire. And the Hippodrome would have been like the Colosseum in Rome, where, you know, in one day in that Hippodrome in Istanbul, they said 65,000 men were slaughtered in one day inside that Hippodrome. And I was having those blood and gut dreams about being hacked to death. So that gave me a pretty strong indication of what can happen. But there was a more specific one. I lived for a while on, as I said, on a nude commune about 100 miles north of San Francisco. But before I actually lived there, I decided that I was going to spend the winter being, you know, sleeping out and being a survivalist for the winter. I mean, it wasn't really a survival. I don't know what the word was. I just thought, you know, I'll camp out all winter, because this was in a geyser area that had all these hot springs, so that even though it was on the river and it was snowing or something, there'd be a hot pool right there, and you could have a really nice hot bath. And to me, a hot bath, please. You know, I like a hot bath. So at that point, I was with my dog, Corey. I had adopted in Golden Gate Park a little puppy that was crying and whimpering, that was a blonde dog that grew up to be, as they ascertained, was half lab and half Samoyed husky. It was a beautiful blonde, 65-pound, wonderful friend who became my travel companion, as if I didn't have enough responsibilities. So now I'm with him, and it turns out that this winter I'm sleeping on this river, creek, whatever you'd call it, was the coldest winter since the Donner Party had frozen in the foothills of the Sierras. You know, so I thought, you know, again, it was bad timing, but it was good to have a great big husky to hold on to all night. But the point of this story is this, that I kept having this dream over and over again that was very specific. And that is that someone came in and slit my right leg open, and blood gushed out, and so did dollar bills. I know. At first I thought it must have been that I'd been to a strip club or something after the wrong drink, but no. It was just this horrible dream. And I don't like gore and violence and that kind of thing, so it was very disturbing to me. And I found out later on the following, that this particular land had been won in a gambling game at the beginning of the 20s and then had become a bootleg operation because it was very private land in the foothills of the Sierras. It was in Geyserville, but around Geyserville and Cloverdale. For you who know Northern California, it's about halfway to the Mendocino coast. And it had been a bootleg operation, and this guy had been a runner, and then he had sort of gone off the deep end, and he'd become kind of a hermit, or whatever you call it, you know, like my friend Charles I took care of for years. You're just somebody that lives in the woods and doesn't communicate. You know, it's maybe where the autistic spectrum has gone off into a different direction. But the word on the street was apparently, even though there was no street there, that he was hoarding all this money in the pant legs of his quilted, very heavy, layered denim. And he had been actually found dead, that someone had slit open his leg and had found all the money, and he had bled to death in the exact same spot that I slept. And that told me that, because I'm not one of those la-la land, metaphysical, you know, whatever, I don't know. I don't make light of that. It's just not my thing. It's just that I just think that if the dream was absolutely specific to the murder that took place there, that tells you something about murdered souls. But most importantly, it told me what had happened to that little girl. Because in 1970 in that house, the look on her face and the feeling that I had being around her, and then the feeling I had being in that place, told me very clearly she had been murdered.